The knock on my door came at 8:51 p.m. on a Saturday night, and in that single moment, everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family crumbled to dust. I'm Rebecca, and I'm about to tell you how losing my husband and son taught me the most brutal lesson of my life. That blood doesn't make you family. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Before the silence took over my life, I lived in what people called a perfect world. My husband Nathan was the kind of man who built bridges, literally. He was a structural engineer who saw the world in terms of load-bearing capacities and stress tests, yet he treated my heart like it was made of spun glass. Our son, Ethan, 12 years old and brilliant, had just won his first robotics competition. He had Nathan's analytical mind and my stubbornness. We lived on a sprawling estate in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, a place where old money whispered and new money shouted. I was neither. I was just the architect who designed the landscapes that made everyone else's estates look like paradise. But paradise has a maintenance cost, and I was paying mine in cash. I wasn't just supporting my own household. I was the silent engine, keeping my entire biological family afloat. My parents, Edward and Susan, lived in a luxury retirement condo in downtown Chicago that I paid for. Not partially, fully. Every HOA fee, every utility bill, every emergency assessment, they treated it like their birthright, a natural extension of having a successful daughter. And then there was Savannah, my younger sister. She lived in the guest cottage on my property, a 2-bedroom structure that was nicer than most people's primary homes. She called herself a lifestyle influencer, which mostly meant she staged photos of my garden and my boat for her Instagram feed, while complaining that the Wi-Fi in the cottage wasn't fast enough for her live streams. I never minded the money. I made enough of it. My firm was billing 7 figures annually, and Nathan did well. We were comfortable. What I minded was the assumption, the unspoken rule that because I was capable, I was obligated. I was the strong one, the fixer. The bank. I had trained them well. I had taught them that my love language was a wire transfer, and my boundaries were suggestions they could ignore. Then came that Saturday night. The storm hadn't been forecasted to be that severe. Nathan and Ethan had taken the boat out for a twilight run, something they did almost every weekend in the summer. They loved the quiet of the lake before the tourists woke up, or late at night when the water turned into black glass. I had stayed behind to finish a landscape rendering for a client in Milwaukee. I remember feeling annoyed that the wind was rattling my studio windows. Just annoyed. Not afraid. When the Coast Guard officer stood on my porch, water dripping from his hat onto my slate entryway, I didn't scream, I didn't collapse. My brain simply categorized the information. Boat capsized. Sudden squall. No survivors found initially. Then, hours later, bodies recovered. The words were data points in a catastrophic system failure. I remember thanking him. I actually thanked him for telling me my husband and son were dead. That's what shock does. It turns you into a robot because if you feel anything, you'll die too. The next morning, the house was silent. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. I needed my mother. I needed my father. I needed my sister. I picked up the phone and called my parents first. They were at brunch. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background. When I told them, my mother gasped, dropped her fork, and cried for exactly 2 minutes. Then she asked about the funeral arrangements. "We need to know the dates, Rebecca," she said, her voice trembling but efficient. "Because we leave for the European river cruise on Thursday. You remember, the Viking tour? We've been planning this for a year." I stared at the phone. "Mom, the funeral won't be until Friday or Saturday. The coroner has to release. They have to release them." "Well," my father's voice came on the line, pragmatic as always. "Can't you push it to next week? Or maybe do a memorial later? This trip costs $16,000. Rebecca, it's non-refundable. We can't just throw that kind of money away." $16,000. The price of my husband and son's final dignity was $16,000. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. starting at my heart and freezing outward to my fingertips. You're asking me to delay burying my husband and child so you can go on a boat ride? It's a luxury cruise, my mother corrected, sounding hurt. And honestly, Rebecca, seeing you in this state, it's going to be too much for us. We're older. Our hearts can't take that kind of stress. We need this trip to heal from the shock. We're grieving too, you know. To heal. They needed to heal from the shock of a phone call while I was standing in a house full of my dead son's unfinished Lego sets. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed end. Then I walked out to the guest cottage. Savannah was on the patio, filming a TikTok about her morning routine. She paused the video when she saw me, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic sympathy. "Becky, oh my God," she said, reaching for me but not actually touching me. "I heard. Mom called. It's devastating. Truly. I need you to help me," I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow. "Mom and Dad aren't coming to the funeral. They're going on their cruise. I need you here. I can't do this alone." Savannah bit her lip, looking down at her perfectly manicured nails. "About that. I was actually going to go with them. They have an extra ticket because Aunt Linda canceled. And they offered it to me. I was going to surprise you." "You're leaving? Becky, look at you," she said, her voice taking on a patronizing, soothing tone. "You're the strongest person I know. You handle everything, you always have. If I stay, I'll just be a mess. I'm an empath, you know that. I feel things too deeply. Being around all that death energy, it would destroy my mental health. And I can't be a support to you if I'm falling apart, right? So really, me going is the best thing for both of us. I'll light a candle for them in Budapest. It'll be beautiful." She smiled. A sad, brave, martyr's smile. As if she was doing me a favor by abandoning me. I stood there on the lawn I paid for, looking at the sister whose credit card bills I paid, whose car lease was in my name, whose entire existence was subsidized by the labor of the husband she wouldn't mourn, and I realized something profound. I had been so good at carrying the world that they forgot I could be crushed by it. My competence had made me invisible to their empathy. They didn't see a grieving widow, they saw a glitch in their ATM. They assumed I would just handle this, like I handled the taxes, and the repairs, and the drama. "Okay," I said. Go to Europe." "You're the best," Savannah squealed, finally hugging me briefly before pulling away to check her phone notification. "I knew you'd understand. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Hold down the fort." I watched her walk back into the cottage. I walked back to the main house. I sat in Nathan's leather armchair, the one that still smelled like his cologne and sawdust. I didn't cry. The tears had evaporated. In their place was something else. A clarity so sharp it felt like a blade. They wanted to go to paradise. They wanted to leave me in the ashes of my life so they could drink champagne on the Danube. They thought they could pause their family duties and resume them when it was convenient. They thought, the money, the house, the lifestyle, that it was all just a natural resource, like air or water, always there, always free. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the funeral home. I called Mr. Henderson, our family lawyer. "Jim," I said when he answered, "I need you to come over. And bring the deed to the guest cottage. And the paperwork for the condo in Chicago." "Rebecca, I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "I heard the news. Is there anything I can do?" "Yes," I said. "You can help me evict my family." The funeral was on a Friday morning. It was a beautiful day, the kind of weather Nathan would have loved. Clear skies, a light breeze off the lake, the sun turning the water into diamonds. The church was full. Nathan's colleagues from the engineering firm were there. Ethan's robotics club filled 2 rows. A sea of awkward, grieving 12-year-olds, in ill-fitting suits. My neighbors, people I'd only exchanged pleasantries with over hedges, were there holding casseroles and tissues. But the front pew was empty. There is a specific kind of violence in an empty pew. It screams louder than any eulogy. The wooden bench, polished and reserved with a little family sign, sat there like a gap in a smile. Every time I looked at it, I didn't see wood. I saw my mother sipping a mimosa on a riverboat. I saw my father checking the stock market on his phone. I saw Savannah taking a selfie with a cathedral in the background. I didn't cry during the service. I had done my crying. Now, sitting next to Mr. Henderson, who held my hand with a grandfatherly grip, I felt something else taking root in my chest. It wasn't sorrow. It was the cold, hard click of a lock snapping shut. I looked at that empty pew and I realized that my husband and son weren't the only people I had lost this week. My biological family had died too. They just hadn't stopped breathing yet. When I drove back to the estate, the silence of the house didn't crush me like it had the day before. Now, it felt like a workspace. It felt like a battlefield where I held the high ground. I didn't go into the main house. I walked straight to the guest cottage. I used my master key, the one Savannah hated me having because it was an invasion of privacy, and let myself in. The air inside smelled like her expensive vanilla perfume and entitlement. Her ring light was set up in the living room, facing the window with the best view of my lake. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I walked to the kitchen, pulled a roll of heavy-duty black contractor bags from under the sink, and went to her bedroom. I didn't fold anything. I opened her closet, grabbed armfuls of designer clothes I knew for a fact I had paid for, and shoved them into the bags. The silk blouses, the cashmere sweaters, the limited edition sneakers, they all went into the black plastic abyss. I cleared the bathroom counters, sweeping hundreds of dollars of skincare products into the trash. I stripped the bedding. I boxed up the ring light. In 2 hours, the cottage was stripped bare. It looked like what it was. A structure I owned, occupied by a ghost. I dragged the bags to the garage, stacking them next to the recycling bins. Then, I called the locksmith. I need the locks changed on the guest cottage, I told him. And I need the gate codes reset. Today. He was there in 20 minutes. While he worked, drilling out the cylinders, I went into my study in the main house and opened my laptop. It was time for the digital purge. I logged into my banking portal. The screen glowed with the numbers that had kept my family comfortable for a decade. It was a complex web of automatic transfers and linked accounts, a circulatory system of money that kept them alive. I looked at it, like Nathan used to look at a structural blueprint, searching for the load-bearing walls. First, the Chicago condo, my parents' retirement haven. I found the standing order for the HOA fees. $1,200 a month. Click. Cancel. Confirm. Next, the utility autopay. Click. Cancel. Confirm. Then, the car leases. My father drove a Lexus SUV that he claimed was necessary for his bad back. The lease was in my name, with him as an authorized driver. I contacted the leasing company through the portal. Report vehicle for repossession upon lease termination. Stop payments. Finally, Savannah. Her credit card was a supplementary card on my Amex Platinum account. I pulled up the recent transactions. In the last 3 days since my husband and son died, she had charged $400 at a duty-free shop in Heathrow, and another $200 for a private tour in Budapest. She was grieving on my dime. I didn't just freeze the card. I reported it lost and requested a replacement with a new number, effectively severing the link. Then I went to her cell phone plan, her car insurance, her streaming services. Cancel, cancel, cancel. It was rhythmic. It was hypnotic. With every click, I felt lighter. I wasn't being vindictive. I was simply correcting a long-standing accounting error. I had listed them as assets in the ledger of my life, but they were liabilities. And a good CEO cuts liabilities before they bankrupt the company. When I finished, the sun was setting over the lake, casting long, bloody shadows across the water. My phone sat silent on the desk. They didn't know yet. They were asleep in Europe, 6 hours ahead, dreaming of castles and river wines. They didn't know that while they slept, their world had been foreclosed. 2 days later, the silence broke. But it didn't break with a phone call or an apology. It broke with a notification from my bank app. Transaction declined. The Imperial Hotel, Vienna. Amount, $450. Then another. Transaction declined. Cafe Central. Amount, $85. They had landed. They had eaten. And now, They were realizing that the credit limit on their reality had reached 0. I sat in my studio, sketching a retaining wall for a client, watching the failed transaction alerts roll in like a ticker tape of their confusion. I waited for the angry phone calls. I expected my father to demand I fix the glitch. I expected my mother to weep about embarrassment at the checkout counter. But the calls didn't come. Instead, the notifications shifted apps. Instagram. Savannah had gone live. I clicked the link, the screen filled with her face, bathed in the soft, flattering light of a hotel vanity. She was crying perfect, single tears that didn't ruin her mascara. She wasn't angry. She was performing devastation. "Hey guys," she whispered to her followers, her voice trembling. "I wasn't going to post today. Honestly, I'm just heartbroken. As you know, my family suffered a tragedy this week. And now it seems like my sister is having a severe mental health crisis." I watched, fascinated by the architecture of the lie. "Rebecca is. She's lashing out," Savannah continued, wiping a tear. "She locked us out of our accounts. She's trying to hurt us, because she's hurting. We came on this trip because she told us she needed space, you know? She begged us to give her time alone to process everything. And now, she's painting us as the villains for respecting her wishes. It's just so toxic. Please pray for her. We're stranded in Vienna trying to figure out how to help her from here." The comments flooded in. "Stay strong, Savannah. Grief makes people crazy. You're such a good sister for dealing with this." It was a masterclass in the victimhood of the villain. I realized then that Savannah wasn't just lying to her followers, she was lying to herself. She had to. The human psyche is fragile. It cannot hold the truth that you abandoned your grieving sister to drink wine on a riverboat. That reality is too ugly. So, to look at herself in the mirror, she had to construct a new reality where I was the monster. She couldn't be the person who left. I had to be the person who pushed her away. It was a survival mechanism for her ego. Then came the flying monkeys. The extended family, the aunts and cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years, began to bombard my phone. Aunt Linda texted, "Rebecca, I know you're grieving, but cutting off your parents' funds while they are abroad is elder abuse. Nathan would be ashamed of you." My cousin Tyler sent a voice note. "You need to unlock those cards right now. You're dishonoring your husband's memory by acting like a petty tyrant. They are your family. They weaponized my dead husband. They used Nathan's name to try and pick the lock I had put on my wallet." I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post a counter video screaming the truth. Defense implies there is a debate, and I was done debating my own worth. I simply took screenshots. Every text, every comment, every second of Savannah's video. I archived them in a folder labeled Evidence. Let them talk. Let them spin their stories in Vienna, while I sat in the quiet house they abandoned. They were digging a grave for their reputations, and I was just the silent observer, holding the shovel they didn't know they had handed me. I sat in the quiet of my study, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. The evidence folder was growing, a digital dossier of my family's unraveling. But I needed more than screenshots. I needed leverage. It was time for the professional escalation. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Henderson's direct line. It was late, but I knew he would answer. He had been my father's friend for 30 years, but over the last decade, he had become my confidant. He had handled the purchase of the condo, the structuring of my business, the creation of the trust for Ethan. He knew where every skeleton was buried, because he had helped dig the graves. "Jim," I said, when he picked up on the second ring, "I need to see you, now." He didn't ask why. He simply said, "I'm at the office. Come over." His office was in a restored brownstone in downtown Lake Geneva. All mahogany paneling and leather-bound books. It smelled of old paper and expensive scotch. Jim met me at the door, his face etched with concern. He ushered me into his private office and poured me a glass of water from a crystal carafe. "Rebecca," he started, sitting heavily in his chair. "I saw Savannah's video. It's regrettable." "It's a lie," I corrected, my voice steady. "But that's not why I'm here. I need you to pull the file on the Chicago condo." Jim frowned, adjusting his glasses. The condo? Your parents' place? What for? I need to see the deed. He hesitated, a flicker of something confusion? Reluctance? Crossing his face. Then he swiveled his chair to the filing cabinet behind him. He pulled out a thick manila folder and slid it across the desk. I opened it. There it was, in black and white. The purchase agreement. Dated 6 years ago. The mortgage documents. And the deed. Grantee, Rebecca Sterling. Not Edward and Susan Sterling. Me. I had bought the condo outright when my father's previous business venture collapsed, saving them from bankruptcy and public humiliation. I had put it in my name to protect the asset from his creditors, with a verbal agreement that they could live there for life, provided they paid the utilities and HOA fees, which, of course, I ended up paying anyway. But there was another document in the file, a standard occupancy agreement Jim had insisted they sign, mostly for tax purposes. I scanned the clauses until I found it. Clause 14. Termination for cause. The owner reserves the right to terminate occupancy immediately if the occupant engages in illegal activity, causes significant damage to the property, or engages in conduct that brings reputational harm to the owner. Reputational harm. I looked up at Jim. He was watching me closely. They slandered me, I said, tapping the paper. Savannah's video has 50,000 views. She called me mentally unstable. My aunt called me an abuser. They are using their platform, a platform built on the lifestyle I fund, to destroy my reputation. Jim sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. Rebecca. Technically, yes. They are in breach. But evicting your parents. That's the nuclear option. They left my husband and son in a morgue to go on a cruise, Jim. They nuked the bridge. I'm just clearing the rubble. He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. You're right. I watched them do it. I watched them pack their bags while you were picking out a casket. I told your father it was a mistake. He told me I didn't understand the pressure they were under. Ideally, a lawyer remains neutral. But Jim Henderson was a human being first. I'll draft the notice, he said, his voice hardening. Immediate vacancy required upon return. Breach of contract due to defamation and malicious conduct. We'll cite the social media posts as evidence. And listing papers, I added. I want to list the condo for sale. Tomorrow. Rebecca. List it, Jim. I want the for sale sign in the window before their plane lands. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see pity in his eyes. I saw respect. He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him and uncapped his pen. Consider it done, he said. And Rebecca? For the record, Nathan would be proud of you. I walked out of his office into the cool night air. The deed was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a weapon. I had spent my life building a fortress to keep my family safe, never realizing I had locked myself in with the wolves. Now, I had the keys. And I was opening the door. My phone buzzed. A notification from Zillow. New listing. Luxury 2-bedroom condo in Gold Coast, priced to sell. It was done. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for them to come home. They arrived in a rented Lincoln Navigator at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I watched them from the security monitors in my office. They looked like a caricature of a family returning from a luxury vacation, tanned skin that clashed with their angry expressions, designer luggage stacked in the trunk, and an air of aggressive entitlement that radiated even through the grainy camera feed. My father was driving. I watched him punch the code into the keypad at the main gate. 1985. My birth year. Nothing happened. He punched it again, harder this time. Still nothing. The heavy iron gates, which I had designed myself to look like weeping willows forged in steel, remained shut. I saw his mouth moving, forming words I couldn't hear but could easily guess. Then he leaned on the intercom button. The buzzing in my office was relentless. I let it ring for a full minute before I stood up. I didn't press the open button. I walked out the front door, and down the long, winding driveway. It was a beautiful morning, the kind of morning Nathan would have spent on the water. I wore black, not because I was mourning them, but because I was mourning him. When I reached the gate, the scene on the other side was chaotic. Savannah was out of the car, filming the closed gate with her phone, narrating her victimization in real time. My mother was clutching her chest, playing the frail matriarch. My father was red-faced, gripping the iron bars like a prisoner trying to break in. "Rebecca!" he shouted when he saw me. "Open this gate immediately. The code isn't working." I stopped 5 feet away. "I know. I changed it." "Changed it?" Savannah screeched, lowering her phone but keeping it recording. "Are you insane? We live here. All my stuff is in the cottage. You can't just lock us out." "Actually, I can," I said, my voice calm, carrying easily in the morning air. "Because I own it. And as of this morning, the locks on the cottage have been changed too." "This has gone far enough," my mother snapped, stepping forward. "We know you're grieving, Rebecca, but this behavior is unacceptable. We need to get settled. We're exhausted." That flight was a nightmare. And then the cards. "The cards were cancelled," I interrupted. "Just like your residency." I reached through the bars. I wasn't handing them a key. I was handing them a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy with the weight of legal consequences. My father snatched it. "What is this?" "That is a formal notice of eviction for the guest cottage," I said. "And the trespass warning for this property. If you cross this gate line, the police will be called." "You can't do that!" Savannah yelled, her influencer mask slipping to reveal the scared child beneath. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe you can stay at Mom and Dad's condo." My father ripped the envelope open. He pulled out the papers. His eyes scanned the first page, the eviction notice. Then he saw the second page. His face went from red to a sickly shade of gray. It was the MLS listing for the Chicago condo. Status: active. You listed it," he stammered. "You listed our home." "It's not your home, Dad. It never was. The deed is in my name." "And the occupancy agreement you signed?" "Clause 14. You slandered the owner. You breached the contract." "We didn't slander you," my mother cried. "We just told people you were struggling." "Savannah posted a video calling me mentally unstable to 50,000 people," I said, looking directly at my sister. "You told the extended family I was abusive. That is defamation, and in the world of contracts, words have prices." I looked at them, really looked at them. The tan lines from the vacation they took while I was picking out a casket. The designer sunglasses bought with money that should have gone to my son's college fund. They looked like strangers. They looked like bad investments I had finally liquidated. "You chose," I said, my voice dropping an octave, hard as concrete. "You had a choice between burying your grandson and drinking wine on a riverboat. You chose the boat. You chose paradise." I turned my back on them. "Now you can pay for it." "Rebecca!" my mother screamed, the sound tearing through the air. "We're your family." I didn't stop walking. I didn't look back. I just kept walking up the driveway toward the house that was finally, truly mine. Behind me, the gate stood firm, an iron boundary between the life I had endured and the life I was about to begin. The aftermath wasn't a bang. It was a slow, suffocating slide into reality for them. And a long exhale for me. My parents tried to fight the eviction, of course. They called Jim, screaming about squatters' rights and elder abuse. Jim simply forwarded them the signed occupancy agreement and the screenshots of their slanderous texts. He gave them 48 hours to vacate before he filed for a sheriff's removal. They packed their bags. They didn't go to a hotel. Their credit cards still didn't work. They moved into a short-term rental near the highway, a 2-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. It was the first time in 30 years they were living within their own means. The Chicago condo sold in 4 days. The market was hot, and the price was right. I used the proceeds to set up a scholarship fund in Ethan's name for robotics students. Every dollar that had once funded my parents' country club dues was now going to build the future my son wouldn't get to see. Savannah tried to pivot. She attempted one last victim video, crying about being homeless, but I was done being silent. I released the timeline, just a simple graphic on my own social media. Date of death versus date of vacation departure. The internet does not forgive the abandonment of a grieving mother. The backlash was swift and brutal. She lost her brand deals. She lost her followers. Last I heard, She was working as a receptionist at a dental office in Milwaukee, answering phones for $15 an hour. She finally had to work for the lifestyle she felt entitled to. As for me, I found peace in the quiet. This morning, I sat on the dock with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise turn the lake into a sheet of hammered gold. It's been 3 months, the grief is still there. It comes in waves, sharp and breathtaking, reminding me that Nathan and Ethan are gone. I miss them with a physical ache that sits in the center of my chest. But the heavy, suffocating burden of my biological family is gone. And in the space they left behind, I found something else. I found Mrs. Gable from next door, who brings me fresh bread every Tuesday and sits with me in silence when I don't want to talk. I found Jim, who checks on me, not as a lawyer, but as a father figure who actually protects his own. I found the robotics club kids, who asked if they could still come over to use Ethan's workshop. I realized something profound sitting here by the water. We are taught that blood is the thickest bond, the unshakable foundation. But that is a lie we tell ourselves to excuse toxicity. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. Family is a verb, it is an action. It is showing up when it is inconvenient. It is sitting in the dark with someone when you would rather be in the light. It is canceling the trip. It is holding the hand. My parents and sister had the title, but they refused to do the work. They wanted the benefits of family without the obligations of love. So, I released them. I cut the anchor line, and for the first time in my life, I am not drowning trying to keep everyone else afloat. I am alone in this house, but I am not lonely. I am surrounded by the memory of the people who loved me right, and the presence of the people who chose to show up, and that is enough. If you've ever had to choose your own peace over your family's expectations, tell me your story in the comments. Share this if you believe loyalty is earned, not inherited.